Welcome. I'm Jay Shear with Jay Shear Business Consulting. We build solid foundations for service-based businesses to grow and scale and achieve the results and success they deserve. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. People love to buy, but they don't like to be sold. What feelings come to mind when you think about the last purchase you made where a salesperson was involved? Was it a positive experience? Well, on this episode, we're going to delve into selling with authentic persuasion with the man who wrote the book. Our guest is a sales success consultant, trainer, coach, author, and podcaster. He has spent 17 years in sales and sales leadership and helps people who want to embrace sales as an amazing career and create the framework to persuade like a professional. Please welcome the founder of Quota Consulting, author of Selling with Authentic Persuasion, Transform from Order Taker to Quota Breaker, and the host of the Authentic Persuasion Show, Jason Cutter. Jason, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I'm super excited, not just after that amazing intro, but just where this is going to go, because I feel like we have the same perspective and attitude on a lot of things and this conversation. So I'm excited.
Excellent. Well, as am I, and I'm grateful for you. So let's jump right in. And I've got to share with you that I have thoroughly enjoyed researching you and learning about not only your background, but the work that you do and the experiences that you've had. So it's really been a great journey for me. And as I think about your experiences, it reminds me that our path to finding our purpose, it's often one with lots of different twists and turns and starts and stops. And yours is certainly no exception to that. So if you would, why don't we start with you sharing kind of part of your journey and what ultimately led you to the work that you're doing today?
Well, I think, and I appreciate that. It's interesting, and we'll probably touch on this, but I beat myself up a lot mentally and judged myself for all the starts and stops and how windy and messy my path was for the longest time. And then I realized how much value is in that. Like you said, right now I focus on helping companies and individuals with basically their selling effectiveness and selling in a way that both benefits them and the customer. If we look a long time ago, and the reason why I mention that is I grew up in a non-sales household. I was a awkward, shy, only child to two analytical parents that hated salespeople. And that was the framework that I grew up in. And then because I didn't want to deal with people because of just how my nature was, I got my bachelor's degree in marine biology. I tagged sharks for a few years. And then my path took me, I worked at Microsoft for a couple of years doing tech support, finally got into sales at the age of 27, left sales for a while, went back into sales, have seen a lot and been through a lot, some ups and downs for sure.
Knowing that you've been on these different paths leading up to where you are today, is there anything about your background, your upbringing, the experiences that you had that were telling you that you either wanted to experience the world of sales, you wanted to be able to make an impact in others' lives? What was it that actually drew you to the field of selling?
So the honest, and obviously I have to be authentic, it's just how I am, and not sugarcoat it. I had no plans on being in sales. In fact, when I got my first job in sales at the age of 27, it was 2002. It was as a mortgage loan officer in the mortgage business at the growing height of the housing boom. I didn't realize it was sales. I didn't think of it as sales. I received zero sales training. So it wasn't like I sat down and they're like, okay, here's how to sell and say this and overcome this. It was just like, here's the phone. People are going to call, ask them these questions, and then help them get a mortgage. okay, sounds good, right? And everybody was just begging for it at the time. So literally, we joked about, you just answer the phone every once in a while and you make six figures. Like, you don't even have to actually do anything else. I didn't realize that was sales until years later when I got into something that was much harder, and then I had to learn sales. For me, I just thought I was helping people and, helping people buy a home or refinance. And what I did was I made the transition from liking to solve problems not people related to getting familiar and custom, especially my time at Microsoft doing tech support, where it's like, okay, I like solving problems. Let me help people. And then the next thing you know, I'm in mortgages where it's like, let me solve problems and help people buy homes. And then it was like this, it's like the boiling frog. Like, I didn't realize I was in sales because it just kept warming up to that. And then all of a sudden I'm in sales.
Interesting. So had you at that point, had you experienced a positive sales experience where you had made a purchase yourself, let's say, and the selling experience was just outstanding, and then the converse of that, where you'd been in a situation where clearly it just was not a good experience and you didn't feel comfortable? Had you experienced that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I had those experience both from watching my parents growing up, when they would buy cars and sitting in a car dealership as a kid and watching that. And then as an adult, usually the prejudging side is what I found a lot, where, go into a store and literally no one wants to help you, especially if you're dressed a certain way. I used to do it on purpose when I was in college. It was like go into a jewelry store dressed like a college kid and see who cared. Didn't care, go to another store, didn't care, go to another store, and they would treat me like they actually cared about me and want to help, and then they would just get all my money. Like, I was there to spend. I am a great shopper and spender for people who care and want to help me, and no pressure. So yeah, I saw it, both sides.
Yeah, that's those are great experiences to go through, and especially for the work that you're doing, where you're able to collect data points like that to realize what that feels like when you're in an experience like that, so you can explain that and coach someone to be able to work through those situations, and to realize that when there's a negative selling experience, here's what happens, here's why, and here's the feeling that it creates, and how do we ensure that doesn't happen for you, my client.
Yeah, and the one of the biggest challenges I've seen through my career of working with salespeople is a lot of people take those experiences, just like you were asking about, and just like I had, and then they fall into sales. Very few people make it a lifelong goal to be in sales. Very few people grow up as a kid wanting to be a salesperson when they grow up. Some people do. I've met some of them, but most people don't. And then what happens is they end up in sales. They have this collection of good and bad experiences, like you were asking about. They go into sales and they vow to not be a hypocrite. They want to follow the golden rule. They want to treat other people like they like to be treated. And so they sell like they like to buy, but usually that's more on the order taking end instead of a persuading end. And they end up struggling to get results because they're really trying not to push because they think that's the only way to do it. And then they're floundering at the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, what an interesting situation to be in. So we're gonna unpack that a bit here in a moment, because I think there's an important distinction there that we really do need to dig into a bit. So what would you say, based on your experience, are the characteristics of the most effective salespeople?
Well, and I'm glad you asked this. I love this question, especially because there's really no one size fits all. I mean, there's what people think it is, but it's not. For me, those characteristics and traits, those sales success traits that I call, the first one is open and willingness. It's just open to the world, open to new ideas, open to feedback. Curiosity is usually the biggest one that most people would point to, universally, curiosity and persistence slash grit. And then creativity, and then authenticity. So those are my five. If you have those, or you're willing to develop those five things, any other personality traits, any other things you do, the actual tactics you use, those are just, on the layer above that.
So then how does that tie to someone who is effective at persuading versus someone who is an order taker?
Really the couple of traits in there that are the most important when it comes to that shift is the curiosity. It's really being curious about that other person and their situation and wanting to dive deep. I find a lot of people who I would, label as an order taker, and it's not a derogatory term. It's not a stamp for life, like a cursed, label. It's more of a current state of their sales, effectiveness, if you will. Order takers are usually worried about confrontation. They don't want to seem pushy. Lots of questions and digging deep into somebody's situation, no matter what you're selling, can feel to the order taker like that's pushy or invasive. And they don't want to be that person because they've been a buyer where the salesperson's asking lots of questions and they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to give you ammunition to use against me so you can trick me into buying. And so what happens is the order taker doesn't want to do that. So if you can work on that curiosity from a place of empathy, I want to know about your situation so I can help. And then the persistence part, which is now that I know how I can help you, I want to help you and I don't want to let you walk away without getting some help. When you combine those two, especially, it helps a lot of people make that shift.
Makes sense. And how often do you see someone who's an order taker transform into someone who is more effective at persuasion and can be a dynamic salesperson?
So I guess no one's ever asked me that question. So the answer to that question is every time, as long as they're open and they're willing to work on it. Right. So if they're open to see that, right, that's why that first step, that first trait is the most important to me. So a lot of people who are just closed down, especially, let's say veteran salespeople who are like, I don't need your process. I don't need your advice. I don't need your feedback on my phone calls or my meetings. Let me do what I do best. That's why I'm the pro. If they're closed down, they're not going to take that feedback. It's anybody, right, in anything. Versus if you look at like top performing athletes, business people, somebody operating at a high level, they usually have multiple coaches. They want feedback. It stings. There's no time where feedback doesn't sting the ego a little bit, but they understand the value beyond that. And so they're open to it, right? The more successful people I see, the more successful they are, usually the more coaching and accountability they want because they know what's on the other side of that. And so as long as somebody's open, they can make that shift. And for a lot of people, it's really easy when, I point out some things to them. If they're open to it, then it's, they can shift their mindset.
So let's talk about feedback for a moment. What type of feedback have you received throughout your selling career that has really been beneficial and opened your eyes up to additional opportunities to learn in ways that you were able to upskill and just become more effective based on the feedback that you received?
For me, it's always that feedback that, I couldn't see myself when you're in the heat of battle, when you're in the middle of the game, right? You're on that sales call or that conversation and you're just in it versus somebody who's outside of it, watching or listening or watching a replay of that, right? A recording or that meeting afterwards and saying, hey, you do this or do that. This is one of the biggest lessons I learned in the mortgage business in the early days of my sales career that I still remember, where I was missing sales. There was some reason people weren't signing up to move forward with me. And I didn't know why. I couldn't figure it out. My boss at the time sat in on one meeting. And then 10 minutes into that meeting, he's like, I see exactly what you're doing wrong. I see what you're doing that's triggering people to run away, basically screaming. And you need to fix this thing. And so like that was pivotal. We're talking 2002, 2003. And I still remember the exact conversation, the exact lesson. And I teach that same thing to other people. So it's huge.
So self-awareness, critical.
100%. And the hardest part is it's challenging to be self-aware when you just try to analyze it and be self-aware, right? Like I don't know the quote, and I'm going to butcher this, but all the problems we have are a result of our thinking, and all the good stuff we have is a result of our thinking. So it's tough to like separate yourself and go, why am I struggling? And to be honest and objective versus somebody else going, here's why. I listen to somebody else's phone calls, and usually in like 30 seconds, I can tell them why they're not successful in sales. I can just hear it, right? It's just easy. And then, okay, now let's work on it. Yeah, it's tough to be self-aware in a vacuum for sure.
Yeah, no question. Well, there's power in perspective. There's power in, I mean, you just mentioned as an example, you could listen in on someone's phone call within the first minute. You can already identify because you're looking at things through a different set of lens, right? You're able to pull back a bit and really look at the true perspective and what's actually happening from all different angles. And when you're in the middle of a situation, that's very very difficult to do. Do you, in your business, do you typically give like 360 evaluations, things like that, where you're getting feedback from peers as well as the service that you provide on coaching and mentoring and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, it's really like for me, I'm a big one on just the holistic view of everything, especially when we're talking about sales and working with either an individual or a whole sales team. Sales, despite how a lot of organizations treat it as the center of the universe, right? And everything revolves around sales. In a healthy organization, sales is one part of the machine, a vital part, but it's one part, and all the parts are important, right? There's no better child. They're all important children in the family. And so like you have to keep that in mind, and it's all there to serve the customer and the company. And so, yeah, what is the feedback from other departments? What is the integration with other departments? What is the perspective from other people within the organization? All of that is huge. And again, most people can't see it themselves. I mean, this is the biggest thing for anyone listening to this. If they doubt this and they're like, I'm really self-aware, how well can you easily identify somebody else's problem and you instantly know what they should do in your personal life, right? Like they start complaining, you instantly know what they should do and instantly know what would solve their problem, right? The same holds true for when people hear you talking. Just always remember that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, in your experience, where do you see most salespeople failing?
Really, it's the two parts of the authentic persuasion piece, and not just because that's what I focus on, but I focus on that because that's the situation. A lot of people are trying to be the salesperson they think that it takes to be successful. So they're trying to be that charismatic, gregarious, extrovert, storytelling, schmoozing salesperson. And for some people, that's authentic. For most of the people that fall into sales, it's not. That's not their mode. And so what happens is they either try to pretend to be that person and they put on this mask and they try to act, and you can't sustain that. People can detect that. Or they go the other extreme, like I said earlier, which is where they do nothing and they hope people buy. They hope people like them enough and that they're going to make the buying decision. And then that doesn't work either. So there's that part. And then the other thing is that most salespeople I see, they don't have a process, and they don't have a specific way that they go about the sale to help people buy and to pull people along as a leader in the process, right? So here's the thing. Classic sales teaching and coaching is about asking for the close, pushing for the close, closing people, what to say, how to move them forward to the close, how to get somebody to buy. Well, that's pushing somebody. And when you're pushing somebody, then what happens is you're hoping that they're going to move forward, and then there may be a lot of buyer's remorse. What you want is to be a leader. You want people to follow you, just like in an organization. And when you sell in a different way, where you are helping someone see the value, then they'll want to follow you across the finish line. And then that's so different. And it's not about taking orders. It's about setting the sales process up in a way where you're leading that person and then they want what you have. And then it's their decision. And it makes that shift from me selling you to you buying my company, my product, my mission, my vision, whatever it is. And it could be knives, it could be vacuums, it could be, cancer treatment. It's all the same process when you look at it that way.
So I'm glad you brought up leadership and sales leadership. We often see, I certainly did throughout my corporate career, where a top sales performer would be promoted to a sales leadership position. And
Oh,
I mean,
no.
there were numerous times where once that person was promoted into that position, that they just were not effective. They weren't effective as a leader. And I'm sure you've seen that happen as well. And there are obviously tons of examples where that person just excelled and did an exceptional job in a leadership capacity. But when you hear of situations like that, when you hear of companies that, that promote that top performer, and they're just struggling in the leadership role. Why do you believe that that happens? So let me rephrase the question then. What is the difference between a sales leader and a top performing salesperson?
If I had to narrow it down to one thing, is that a sales leader, and like a leader, not a manager, not a boss, but a leader. Like if we're going to put that title on them, and they could be a team lead, but if they act like a leader, then they actually understand that everybody on their team is different and they need to serve each person different. They need to motivate each person differently. They need to teach and train and coach and hold each person accountable differently and understand that everyone's different. That's what a good leader does. And they get everyone to buy into the mission and vision for their reasons, for what they want out of it, right? So your salesperson, why do they want to be successful? And that's what a good leader does. Now, the challenge is that a top performing salesperson generally only cares about themselves and what happened. And again, if you're a top performing salesperson out there, this is not to mean any offense. It's just when companies promote somebody, they think it's a good idea. It's possible. It's very small percentage where it's successful. But generally what happens is top performing salesperson gets promoted. They think everybody is like them. They think everybody's motivated by the same thing they are, whether it's money, President's Club, going to the Caribbean, getting a trophy or plaque, whatever drives them will drive everybody else. The way they sell is the way everyone else should sell. The amount of work they put in, hard work or less work, is what everyone else should be doing. And they just don't see everyone else as different. They think everyone else is like them. And then what happens is they become a leader, they become a manager, and then they treat everyone the same and they coach and manage everyone the same. And that only works for a small percentage. And they're essentially not speaking to the rest of them. Now, what's funny is in a sales role, if you do that as a salesperson with your prospects and treat them all the same, your success will only come as a numbers game. If you just burn through enough people, you'll find the ones who resonate with your sales style. And that's what happens in organizations is they burn through a lot of salespeople while they're waiting and trying to find the right salespeople to resonate with that manager's style, where then all of a sudden it becomes this monoculture of people like that manager.
I've certainly seen that happen time and time again as well. So if you were to give a piece of advice then to a small business owner that's looking to hire a salesperson, what advice would you give them? What would be a good starting point?
There's so many things. If I had to boil it down, I think the biggest thing you want is somebody who is in alignment with your company and your sales process and requirements. So the first part, the alignment with the company, is the cultural fit. Is it a good cultural fit? Is this person going to be somebody on your team that you're going to want on your team? A lot of times people hire salespeople, they're either desperate or they're not thinking about it. Here's the fundamental thing. You can teach somebody how to sell if they're open to it, but you can't change somebody's attitude generally or their view on things or their perspective, right? Like I had a friend of mine, his hiring mantra was hire the smile, train the skill. Like you can't train the smile, right? You can't train somebody to like care about your customers. They have to have that. You can teach them the rest. So it's got to be a cultural fit. And then the other thing is that you really got to test your candidates as you're hiring them in the same way that your sales process works. So I usually make people go through some hoops before I hire them because I want to see how they react, right? Like if I tell somebody, hey, I'll call you Friday and follow up on this interview, right? Mr. Candidate, Mrs. Candidate, and I don't call them on Friday and then I just ignore them and they never follow up with me, guess what they're going to do with their pipeline, right? They're going to ignore their pipeline. When their pipeline said, I'll call you back and they don't, they're going to move on. I put people through some paces to see how they're going to react. Same thing in the interviews. I open my interviews with, before I get started, what questions do you have? And if somebody says, I don't have any questions, I'm excited about this, guess what they're going to do on every single one of your sales calls or meetings? They're not going to have questions because that's not their mode. So you just want to make sure you are looking for fine details of what fits with what you know it takes to be successful in your organization.
Well, I'm glad you shared that advice because it's there have been times where, I've seen a business that was just so desperate to increase sales. They just wanted to see additional product or service sold, that they were willing to really hire anyone who walked in the door that
Mhm.
maybe had success in a prior life, that had success at another company, but didn't necessarily take the time to assess whether that individual truly did align with the core values of their business. And maybe things start off on the right foot, but you start to see cracks over a period of time. So fitting in with culture, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is a huge piece of this. So if there was one thing that I would bolt on to what you said, it would be to make sure that you take the time to really do your due diligence, ask better questions, find out about this person's what their values are, and make sure that you are taking your time before making a decision and moving forward with someone.
Yeah. And to, again, to mimic the process. If you do a long sales cycle, then I'm not saying you need to draw out the process long term, but you need someone who's going to be patient and has the stamina and is persistent, right? If you have a 6-month sales cycle, it doesn't mean you have to wait 6 months, but you can't make a decision in 2 days because you're setting them up for failure because you don't know. Like, you want to put them through some hoops. If there's a lot of no's, like, I know some people who out there literally tell the perfect candidates, no, you're not getting the job. They turn them down because they want to see who will come back and say, I think this is a great fit. How can I work here? I really want to work here. Because guess what they'll do with your pipeline, right?
They're going to work it.
Yep.
They're going to work it. Very effective. Interesting. I like that. So let's talk about your book, Selling with Authentic Persuasion. But before we dig into it, I would love for you to share with us what the process was like writing the book. What was that journey like for you?
I don't want to sound negative, but it was long and painful. I started writing it years ago. I actually started writing a book many, many years ago, and then imposter syndrome and doubt kicked in, and I threw that book away. And then when I wanted to write this, I actually had 3 books in mind that I wanted to write at the same time. Wasn't quite sure on the total concept. I decided that I wanted to get it done. I felt it burn. I knew that I wanted to do it. So it was burning from inside of me. It wasn't just like an itch and something I wanted to do. So I knew somebody who does self-publishing book coaching for helping people write books and get them published, get them printed. So I hired him. Like, I was like, I'm doing this, so I need help. It goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of this conversation. Easy decision. Set up a call, talk to my man, Patrick Snow, and was like, hey, we've only talked once before. How does this work? I need your help. I want someone to hold me accountable. He gave me the playbook. He said, here's the framework. Here's your assignment this week. Do this. Okay, now here's your assignment next week. Do this. And just like a personal trainer, we got there. I wrote the book in the first time I wrote it in 8 weeks, a couple of hours every morning while working a full-time executive position, and wrote, it's a pretty long book. So I wrote that. It was really easy. Read through it after I wrote it, threw it away because it was complete garbage. Didn't do anything for 3 months. And I was pretty right. Like, not just people who judge themselves, but I read through, I was like, this is boring and I don't get it. And what's the point? And if I don't get it and like it, not just self-doubt, but like, I was like, what's the point of this? So I threw it away, and then I waited a few months, and then I sat back down and I rewrote it again from scratch in 6 weeks this time while working, about 56,000 words. And then went through an editing process with an editor. And that was long because he would edit it and I would print it and read it and then edit it and then give it back. And then I sat on it for months. I didn't have a title for the longest time. And then I pushed myself one day. Authentic Persuasion jumped in my head. So I'd written a book with no title, with no real plan. And then the title came, and then I rewrote the book a third time and rearranged it. And then it was easy. But the whole process from coach to print was 2 years.
Wow, that's incredible. Talk about stamina and just continuing to push through. That's amazing. What changed though in you between the version that you wrote where you looked at it, read it, and felt that it was boring, to the version that we see today? What was the switch?
It was really getting in touch with what my value was. I mean, I knew I had a lot of information after just years of being in sales, helping just hundreds and hundreds of salespeople. Was like I had all these tools in the toolbox, but it was like, okay, but here's just a random pile of tools. Almost think of like I just bought one of those random boxes of tools from a garage sale, and I just have all these tools, and then I just threw them all into a book, right? That's kind of what it felt like. There was no theme. There was no like, you're here, and I want to help you get here. And then that's over time, that's what that clarity happened, especially when the authentic persuasion like framework hit me one day, because that wasn't there until then. And then that label tied everything together, which is like, what do I help people do? And then once I got clear on that, then it was easy. Then the rest of it was just very simple, and helped with the imposter syndrome and the doubt that I faced pretty much every time I had looked at it on my desk and read through it and went, who the heck am I to write a book? Like there's some greats out there that write lots. I have a lot of them on my shelf, and it's like, who am I? And then just knowing like, doesn't matter. Like this will help somebody, and I just got to do it.
Well, we're so thankful that you did continue to push through. And, obviously you have your own unique voice, your own unique style and way of delivering your information and your experience. And it works, it resonates. So that's obviously, thank you for continuing to move forward.
Thanks.
So yeah, so the book it's really broken down into three primary sections. You have being authentic, you have positive persuasion, and then you have sales success in tangibles. So could you maybe distill a bit and give us some highlights if you were to pick just a one or two of the meaningful sections in each of those three parts, and share some of that information with us? That would be wonderful.
Sure. I think that, in the authenticity section, the first part of the book, it's, if I had to nail it down to a couple things, it's one is that self-awareness. So what are your fears that you have that are creeping in? A lot of it is that the stuff that we talk about where it's like, how do you like to buy and where does that come in? And then also, what are your strengths, and realizing I really love spreadsheets and data, right? Most sales trainers would say, don't do that. Like you need to tell stories, you need to do this and do that. But it's like, I'm really good at solving problems by data and stats and numbers, and being like, here's what we need to do and here's why. Understanding your strengths and leveraging that, and understanding that you can use that if you want. So that one's huge. And then the motivation piece. On the authenticity side, it's really about what's true for you, what motivates you. And a lot of people say money, but like, what is it about the money? What do you want to do? I do an exercise I guide people through in the book, and then also in all of my coaching and training, and every new person I work with or gets hired onto a team, go through the process of essentially making a vision board. What do you want to do? Take you from being motivated extrinsically, right? Like the carrot or the stick, like I got to bribe you to work harder, or I got to beat you to work harder, right? Or threaten you, versus you just work harder because you have something you want to achieve, and my job is to support you. If you can get to that point, no matter what you're selling, and realizing sales is a part of everything we do in life, then that makes it easy. So that's those two things are huge for people. And then realizing it's leadership, like we talked about earlier, which is your job is to lead people. It's not to push people. It's not to trick people. It's just to lead them. And then the positive persuasion section is about a framework. It's about actually being intentional about moving somebody forward and doing it for the right reasons, and wanting to persuade them instead of being an order taker. And the biggest thing from that section, without getting into the tactical stuff here for the sake of time, is most people don't realize it's their duty to help the right people buy. Meaning, if I'm talking to you, Jay, and I know what I'm selling, right? And I'm aware of it, and I'm talking to you, and it turns out you have problem X and I have solution X. If I don't help you buy, if I don't persuade you to stop being afraid, to stop being scared of change, to stop, whatever's in the way, right? And if I let you put your head back in the sand or run away or go buy from someone else, I've actually failed you, right? I've let you down instead of doing my duty, right? And that goes, again, we're talking knives, vacuum cleaners, consulting, businesses, helping them. Like I treat it all the same. If you have problem X or goal X and I have solution X, it's my duty to help you. And when you make that shift, then it doesn't feel pushy. It doesn't feel like I am desperate trying to get you to buy. I'm now helping you because I care. And that empathy is so huge. And a lot of people are scared of empathy versus going all in on the empathy, but then moving forward, not empathy as an order taker, but empathy as a sales professional. So that's that section. And then the intangibles, which is fun because these are the random things. And just so you know, it's set up in this order. A lot of people approach me and say, what can I say to close more deals? It's like, well, we got to deal with you first, the authenticity piece. Like I can give you all the tactics in the world, but if you're not self-aware, if you don't understand, you don't have the right foundation mentally, like of why you're doing it and what you want to do, why you want to be successful, it's not going to work, right? Like somebody gives me a hammer and says, go build something. It's not going to work because I don't have the foundation of like what I want to do with it versus, somebody else. So then there's the intangibles, and those are the little things that get in people's ways. Like buyer's remorse, how to deal with buyer's remorse, how to prevent it, how to deal with cancellations. And then, like I said earlier, people's objections. People usually come into a selling role with their baggage as a customer. And then what they do is they unconsciously project that on other people, right? I'm dealing with some people right now who it's like they literally can't afford what they're selling as a salesperson. And guess what? They get a price objection a lot because their energy is just protruding this. And if somebody tries to object to the price, they have no defense because they agree. And so that kills a lot of sales for people. And so that's one of those highlights in that section.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because it gives our audience a view of what the book entails and what they can expect to receive. And it is chock full of great information. So I would certainly encourage anyone and everyone to go check out this book, and we'll certainly provide a link to the book in the show notes. So let's get tactical for a moment and talk about the impact of sales training. So could you share maybe a recent example of how you've helped a sales team get more wins on the board?
Yeah. So recently I was working with a team. It was actually a retail furniture team. So a series of stores doing it remote, of course, in this day and age. And what's super fun for me is I've never sold retail and I've never sold furniture. So, however, here's what I'll tell you. I've sold lots of things. I've worked with lots of different companies, and I've also been a customer of some really bad experiences going into a store and really good experiences going into a store, kind of going back to what you asked me earlier, pre getting into sales. And so I can blend what I know works fundamentally and then also what I know feels gross or is ineffective as a customer and just create that. And so it was great because one of the things is the retail team felt like it was their job to, basically show people all the options and give them an unlimited buffet and walk around, show them all these things. They also felt like, or were in this common pattern of, hey, how are you? What brings you into the store today? Right. And doing all of these things. And fundamentally, I taught them, when in doubt, do the exact opposite. And then ask lots of questions. If you were going to talk to somebody for 15 minutes, sit down and ask 10 minutes worth of questions to nail it down, and then spend 5 minutes with like, okay, which one do you want? The red one or the blue one? Like literally, I'm now a professional. I'm going to dissect what you need, and then I'm going to take you to it instead of walking around the store for an hour hoping you see something and then you hand me money. Instead, I'm going to be like a doctor. I want to diagnose what you want. I'm going to give you the prescription, and then we're going to go to the register. And for them, that was huge because they shifted how they approached the conversations and spent more time on the front end and less time on products and benefits and features. And when they did get to the products and benefits and features, it was very specific to that person. Instead of like, this does this and this does this, it's like, this does this, which fits with what you're looking for because you told me this.
I love that. And it makes such perfect sense. It seems like it would be common practice, but clearly it's not. So
Nope.
yeah, what a great example. What a great example. So what are you doing to challenge yourself to grow personally and professionally? Are you working with coaches? Do you work with mentors yourself?
I do. And it's interesting because on this journey, with my first real coach being my book writing and publishing coach that I hired years ago. I mean, we're talking
Mhm.
2017 when that happened, 2018. But yes, I am always pushing myself, always finding ways to have a mentor, to have a coach. It's just something weird inside of me. I don't like being a hypocrite. I don't like telling people hire me as a coach or a consultant. But I don't need one because I know everything and I'm so good. I don't like to ask people to do things that I wouldn't do myself or I'm not doing, right? As a boss, I would never ask you to dump the garbage if I'm not willing to do it, or I haven't done it, or I'm not going to do it if you're not around. I'm just that kind of person, and energetically. So I try to have multiple coaches, mentors. Right now I'm in some challenge groups where it's like an 8-week challenge and everyone's pushing ourselves. Since launching this book, I have actually published 2 Kindle ebooks since then. So now I've published a total of 3 books. I'm working on the 4th book, and I'm pushing myself to launch a Kindle ebook in the series that I have on the pace of about 1 a month. And again,
Wow.
keeping in mind, as of X number of months ago, I had 0 books. Most people have 0 books, and I'm on a path. I get to about 12 to 15 of these books. Plus, I have a couple others that I'm going to do on top of that. So I'm always like pushing myself for things that just fit with this mission. And then what kind of coaching, what kind of accountability, who can I have to push me? Because again, where I'm at is a result of what I think. If I want to get somewhere else, I have to change the thinking, the process, my activities. Same thing I'm doing for my clients. And so I play that same game with myself.
Good for you. What would you like your legacy to be?
I've shied away about thinking about that, that whole, like, what would people say at your funeral type of eulogy thing. The biggest legacy for me would be that I helped people transform and embrace who they are, and then go after what they wanted in life and feel successful in their life. Not successful by anyone else's terms, not what's necessary, not about a dollar amount, not about having this or doing that, but like what makes them happy. And then that impact being there and then shifting the way that is. I mean, my focus right now is on salespeople. My mission and focus is to create 1 million authentic persuaders, and grow from there. Because if that's the case, then people are selling in a way that the buying public would actually want to deal with, instead of be afraid of or being guarded against dealing with. And so if we can do that, then we can turn sales into a profession, kind of like the medical profession. Right now, it's the Wild West, which is why people don't like dealing with salespeople. So that is one side of it, and that's my current focus. But just fundamentally helping people be successful and being happy in their life and going after what they want, and just embracing their strengths and using that to provide value to other people. The more I can do that, that's what my legacy is focused on right now.
Well, I tell you, you mentioned that you really don't give a whole lot of thought to defining that. But you just said some very powerful legacy statements.
I guess
so make
so.
sure you write those down, because that's outstanding.
I'll write that down. That's it.
Yes, please do. So what are you most proud of today, and what are you most hopeful about?
So this is going to sound interesting. Well, it's always interesting. What I'm most proud of is that I have kept going, right? And it sounds kind of weird. There's a bunch of stuff I've done. There's the journey versus the destination conversation. There's things that I'm proud of that I've done, but what I'm most proud of is that I've kept going. Financial ruin, getting knocked down, failing at businesses, failing at, marriages multiple times, like literally just continuing to get up and knowing that there's something more, and that I want to figure out a way to help more and more people, to me is the biggest thing I'm proud of. It's like, my life has been that windy path and a lot of ups and downs, but like Les Brown says, like, get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. That's what I'm most proudest of, that like I just keep getting up. And I know there's more coming. There's more downs, and I'll just have to keep getting up. But for me, that's like the umbrella thing.
Beautifully said. You mentioned at the very beginning of your book, you acknowledge your parents and you acknowledge your grandparents, if I remember correctly. But when you were
Yep.
acknowledging your parents, you mentioned about the winding road and the path that you've been on. And sometimes, and I'm paraphrasing, it won't be exact, but it sounded like you were basically saying it's been an unconventional journey at times, but they've always supported you. They've always been there for you.
Yep.
And talk about
Yeah.
unconditional love. That's beautiful. I think that's fantastic. I love it. And what do your parents say to you today when they look at you and when they see how far you've come and where that road has taken you? What do they say?
I mean, I am super fortunate. I feel like I definitely won the parent lottery. They are so supportive. They're so happy. I mean, I know there's people out there who do stuff like I do, write a book, have these different things, and their parents just doubt them or put them down. I'm so thankful. Like my parents are out there telling people. Like my parents bought a car recently and told the person about my podcast and the book and told the person to buy my book. They are constantly like selling it for me. So I'm super thankful. They're proud. I mean, the biggest thing that they've always done is, as like anybody, we talked about this earlier, they can see the mistakes I'm making. They can see it. They know that I'm making mistakes at times, right, throughout life, or like decisions they don't think is going to be the best thing, but they've never given unsolicited advice saying, you're doing this wrong, you should do something else. If I ask, the gloves are off. I'm going to get what I asked for. But other than that, they let me live my life and they know it's different. I mean, the easiest example, my parents come from baby boomer generation, get a job, work, get paychecks, have a pension, a retirement, stability, kind of that post-depression, kids of depression era parents and stability. For me, I didn't go down that path, not specifically for any reason. I remember when I was self-employed, helping people in foreclosure, I told my parents I was really excited. I said, hey, I talked to a new client today. This is great. They said, when are you going to get paid? I said, if everything goes well, in about 3 months, I might get a paycheck. And they freaked out, but they were supportive because they couldn't understand not getting a check every 2 weeks. It's just super blessed to have them support me.
Wonderful. I feel you on that one. That's that's an interesting one. So what message would you like to leave our audience with?
I think the biggest thing, no matter who's listening to this, it's all about self-awareness. That's like the number one thing. Yes, I'm focused on sales and kind of that's the underlying part of it, but self-awareness, the faster anybody can get to the point where they understand their strengths, what they like, what they're weakest at, what they're not good at, and then can go more all in on the strengths and what makes them happy and what they're good at and what they can do that provides the most value to others and the most happiness for themselves. The more that somebody can do that and then outsource the rest, or just, with the weaknesses and the other side, the more you can do that, the more the world gets easier in my experience, and the happier people will be with their life and not judging what they should be doing, but instead living their life from a place of self-awareness. That's the biggest thing.
Thank you. So before I ask my final question, Jason, where can we go to connect?
Easiest place, jasoncutter.com, CUTTER.com. I've made that a hub for everything that I have, from the book to the podcast to the consulting to everything going on. So jasoncutter.com.
Again, we'll make sure that we link to that in the show notes. So here is my final question to you. What is one of the biggest gifts that life has given you that you didn't realize at the time?
The biggest gift for me that life has given me is realizing that it will always be okay and always get through it. I mean, the quote that I live by a lot, especially when things are tough, is I have survived 100% of my bad days. And that's what I tell other people when they're struggling, right? No matter what's happening, if you wake up today, you've survived it all so far, right? Which means there's a reason. And that's what I've learned is life has shown me so many times. The biggest gift is I don't know it in the moment, but always in retrospect, I can put some puzzle pieces together and go, that's why that happened. That's why that struggle, that challenge, that failure, that good thing, all of these things, that's why it happened for this moment or for future benefit. And then just having faith, like whatever I'm going through, there's a reason for it. And then just makes everything easier.
Brilliant. Jason, thank you so very much for being here today. I'm grateful for you. Thank you for sharing of your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us and bringing your book to life so we can all enjoy, learn, grow, and become better. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
It's my pleasure. And for the rest of you, thank you for watching and listening. And please take a moment to subscribe and let us know what you think about this episode, and to enjoy more episodes and to learn how Jay Shear Business Consulting can build a solid foundation for your service-based business. Visit jshearbusinessconsulting.com. And until next time, keep learning and growing, invest in sales training, and we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.